All right, so I'm just going to turn the chat box on and try to keep it over here, keep it up so I can see it. So as I just mentioned, right, a lot of you are right in this area, right? You sort of started with the surface. You ran the Rhino script to break the surface and define it as a series of ribs working in both directions, the U and the V, right? Sort of the structure, the bones, right? At the same time, then you brought the surface into Grasshopper and broke it up into a set of shading component as well that can sort of sit on top of the ribs, right? This sort of skin that is performance-based, trying to provide shade from the sun, let's say on the space below. Then taking all of that stuff and unrolling it out onto the XY plane. So that's laid out flat, labeled with the appropriate layers and colors, so that you could take the file to the laser cutter and start to score certain things and then through cut certain things. All of the express intentions of basically manufacturing all the components and then folding them and slotting them and gluing them together, right? To assemble them back into a physical version of this original surface, right? This original pavilion, if you will. All right, and so I want to talk about this again. First of all, I want to reinforce the fact that if you need a backup, right, you learned a couple of things over the last month, no doubt, right, over most of October and parts of November. And so, the key thing is, if you think back to the very beginning when you were running that script and moving slide bars and building your graph in Grasshopper for the components, you're making decisions in a fairly abstract way. You're making decisions on, let's say, numbers and values and variables without necessarily understanding what the implications were downstream when it came to making this, right? Like fabricating it, laser cutting it, and then trying to put it together with, and what I would characterize for me, my fat fingers, right? Clumsy butter fingers. And so now, if you need to, right, you can go back and rerun the Rhino scripts, and again, I would encourage some of you to do that. Go back to the very beginning and go through this motion, go through this process once more. It's made to be relatively quick. You can rerun the Rhino script with different variables, right? Different parameters. It's the same thing. You can basically open up that Grasshopper graph, adjust sliders until you get something that you think will work just right. Whether that's how many times you divide the surface, right? Whether that's how deep those ribs are, in order to make them more structural, in order to keep them from being too flimsy, right? Or maybe it's to try to minimize the amount of gluing you have when you're trying to put all these components on. And now you understand that the more edges you have, the more sort of joints you have, the more hands-on assembly it takes, and that really takes a lot of time, right? So again, sort of completing that feedback loop, you learn something from trying to make this. Now let that information, right, inform, and go back to the beginning, or go back into that process and begin to alter the genotype and therefore the next phenotype, right? So to me, that's the value proposition here, right? Is that this speeds up that feedback loop. We don't have to try to manually model all of this stuff, which would take forever. I mean, it would take days instead of minutes if we had to do it manually. And so with that comes that sort of, again, that opportunity to try to fabricate this. Again, you don't have to cut this out with a X-Acto knife. You can take it to a laser cutter, and instead of taking half of a week, it only takes half of an hour, or a full week, it boils down to a full hour of just laser cutting. In order to get all those components out, they're all curved and they're all different, right? So again, with these tools, it affords you to sort of, again, think about this feedback loop. And I want to emphasize that over and over again this time around. So anyway, enough talking, but except to say that to end that sort of long explanation, I'll probably just go back and rerun everything for this demonstration as well, right? So let's say, ta-da, we're right here, right? We have a bunch of laid out components. We have a bunch of ribs. Looks like they're all ready to be laser cut, and most of you have already done that, right? If they're laser cut, they're ready to be assembled. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how we go from there to something like this, right? Where we start to I'm not sure what that was. Make a sort of exploded axon, showing all these different layers and systems, right? We have this sort of bones and going in one direction, these ribs, the structural ribs going in the other direction, right? Forming that grid shell, that two-way system. And then we have these components and how they all sort of sandwich together here in the center, to sort of show how they all go. And then, to start to think about, this isn't the best way of doing it necessarily, start to think about how you begin to label these things so that at the end, when you're starting to assemble your last model, your final model, you can actually use these drawings to make sure that everything's sort of, lining up and you're slotting the right ribs together in the right place, that you're starting in the right cell for, starting to put your, let's say an A1 versus a 014, right? Or something like that, when you're looking at all these components and cells. All right, and which corner starts the grid and which corner ends the grid. That's really important, right? Well, which direction steps up in letters versus which direction steps up in numbers, right? You guys came against that, and today we're going to talk a little more about how you can go through these things and sort them out. All right, so there's a lot to do. There's some ground to cover between here and being able to produce this, but a lot of these tools that we're going to deal with and some of the workflows that we're dealing with here are touching on a lot of the things that you've already done, right? So as you can imagine, we're going to do a make 2D. We're going to clip out a rendering as well. We're going to composite those in Illustrator. We'll start to adjust line weights. We'll start to add some labels and text and leaders and things like that. We'll look at layers and file management. We'll move and rotate some things around. Again, those are very basic geometric commands. We'll actually open up Grasshopper and create a little graph from scratch here to sort of move things around, to sort of, again, make sure that we're seeing everything we need to in this sort of oblique axonometric vantage point. And so, I don't know if you noticed this, but I can't just move all of these components up because I can't see all of the components, let's say in this back area, right? So what I did is I made a copy of them in Grasshopper where I moved them all to the same plane so I could bake that out as another layer in this sort of sandwich, right? This is sort of exploded axon, composed of all these different components. All right. So again, there's a lot to cover, and that's why I'm recording this, so you can go back and refer to it as you need to. All right. So maybe I'll just go back to, let's see, exploded axon for class. Let's just use that one. Here we are. Yeah. So you can see parts of this process. There's the make 2D. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. All right. Let me go back to all 4 viewports. Oh, that's in rendered mode. I'm going to change that to ghosted just so I can see things a little better. All right. There's a bunch of scores from these things. I started to move ribs and panels around. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to start from scratch. If you look at this, I think layer 1 is just my original surface. I'm going to take all this other stuff and turn it on and just select it all and delete. All right, we'll start from scratch here. There's my surface. So let's say you are starting from scratch. You don't have to, trust me, you don't have to if you don't need to. But I'm just going to go through the motions again just to reinforce this one more time. So there's my surface. I'm going to speed through this. Tools, Rhino scripts. Let's make some ribs. Let's take a surface, a rather kind of dumb surface, and turn it into a set of components, right? Give it some structure. So my buddy Andrew made this script a long time ago, 2005. Man, time flies. I'll hit this green button, select the surface, populate with tiles. All right. Always look at that command line. It'll ask you what you want to do. I'm going to say 15 tiles in one direction, 15 tiles in the other direction as well. Height for each strip, 1/4 inch maybe was too flimsy. I'll go with a 1/2 inch, right, for that depth. Distance between unrolled strips, 10 and 30 seem to be working pretty well for me. The material thickness, 0.03. All right. And I'll let Rhino do the work for me for a moment. There we are. All right. So I can go ahead and close that Rhino script editor and turn off the surface so I don't accidentally screw it up somehow. All right. And so again, just running the Rhino script, here's what I got. You can see that over here, right, as I start to look at each rib, there's a little bit of cleanup to do, right? There's some curves right? That then it filled in with surfaces and poly surfaces. So, you know, I'm gonna have to do some cleanup here. But when I start to select the surfaces, you'll see that when I go to the properties box, it actually labeled each of those surfaces, gave each of those surfaces a name. So in this case, this is V2. So I can imagine that this is V1 and this is V0 over here, V3, V4. So I can begin to start to understand which rib is which. And that's important. And that'll be really important later on. You can see, oh, look at that. Yeah, nice sort of thing. Now, this is just sort of, you know, it's sort of paper thin, right? So we're going to have to offset this stuff and give it some thickness. And we're going to offset that the material thickness, in my case, 0.030, right? So I understand that this bottom row are the V's, starting from V0 all the way to what, probably V15 or something. Yep, there we go. So that this upper row is U's, the U0s all the way to the U15s or whatever. Just gonna, in this case, I'm not really worried about the laser cutting. If I was, I would keep all those labels and start to replace them. But I'm just gonna say cell text, see if there's any text to select here. There, so curves or text. All right, I'm just gonna go ahead and delete those texts. Right, I'm just thinking about preparing this axon. I'm gonna get rid of the scoring too, these zigzags. Some of you really like those zigzags and others of you hated those zigzags. They're meant to be helpful, but if they aren't, you certainly don't have to use them for extra scoring or anything. Some of these were converted to curves. Interesting. All right. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to go to the score layer. I'm just going to delete the score layer. Just get rid of all these at once. Delete current layer. Yeah. Yep. All right. Bam. There we go. Well, that certainly did the trick. All right, I'm going to expand my top view here. And what I want to do is I just want to do that curved Boolean tool and sort of carve out all of these notches all at once. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to see if I can, there we are, curve Boolean, B-O-O-L-E-A-N. You can't see it in the command line. Delete input, all. Combine regions, yes. Output curve, simplify curves, yes. Okay, so I'm going to say, let's select all of these and hit enter when I've selected. And I'm going to select all the inside regions I want to keep. So that one and that one. So I just have to click like, I don't know, 16 times 2, 32 times. Seems like it takes forever when I'm trying to do it in front of you, but it's really quite easy. I mean, you know, within a minute and a half or less, I'm done here. And just sort of clicking on the inside, you know, sort of trim all that stuff away for me, which is nice. Just give me that region on the inside. Maybe. Sometime today. You know what Windows is. Oh, here we go. Okay. Just again, just using curve Boolean. I don't know about you guys. I'm ready for winter break already. No? I mean, the one bad thing about winter break is I'll miss all of you. But, you know, on the other hand, you know, a break sounds pretty good. I mean, by that first or second week of December, I will so be ready for a break. I know you guys will be too. No doubt. I'm preaching to the choir there. All right.
I'm ready for it.
Ready already. I hear you. Loud and clear. All right. So now we have the U's and we have the V's, right? Just really quick. Go ahead and save. There we are. And all right. Now, one thing I'm going to do is I want to make these things sort of three-dimensional, right? So, you know, right now, these are a set of curves, you know, and they're closed and planar. Again, I don't know why my laptop keeps hanging up here. Let's see. There we go. Now it's responsive. And then I have these surfaces. They're really just sort of, you know, again, infinitely thin. And so offsetting and sort of surfacing these things are going to be the next steps here. Let's see. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of this stuff. You know, this is the stuff I would cut in laser cutting anyway. I'm just going to put this on the cut layer, just so it's on a different layer from everything else. There we are. Okay, I can turn that off. I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to select all the curves, right? I said I had a bunch of redundant curves in here. I'm just going to sel curve, CRV, SEL, CRV. Select all those curves, delete them away. This is like, sort of a cathartic thing, if you like spring cleaning and enjoy the idea of getting rid of stuff you don't need, then this is the step for you. All right, or putting them on a different layer and then turning that layer off, or something. Let me just double check. All right, for some reason, all right, it was lagging there just a minute ago. Okay, there we are. Go ahead and save that now. All right, we have U strips and we have V strips. All right, so I'm going to turn off the V strips and just want to look at the U strips here for a moment. I'm going to select them all, make sure they're all joined together. And they are 16 open poly surfaces. Turn the V strips on, turn the U strips off. Do the same thing for the V strips. Select them all, hit join or type in join in the command. There we go. 16 open surfaces. All right. Now we have U's and V's. Okay. Now I'm going to say offset surface for these. I already have, these sort of poly surfaces. I just need to offset them to give them some thickness, right? That material thickness is 0.030, so I'm going to go ahead and select these. Oh, really? Come on. There we are. All right. Solid, yes. Distance, 0.03. Solid, yes. All right. Delete input, yes. All right, I'm ready. Let's see what I get here. All right, so now these things have thickness to them, right? And that's nice to see. It'll be great when we're making a drawing of this and we want it to look like an actual, the actual model rather than just the surfaces that we unroll for the laser cutter, right? So the information, we're not really losing fidelity, we're just adding detail here. Detail that we didn't need for the laser manufacturing, but now we kind of need for the visualization of the actual three-dimensional part, right? So you can see we have all those edges there now. All right, so now let's take a look at these. What did I put those on? I put those on the cut layer, right? All right, so now I have these ribs. Wow, look at those. All right, so there's a couple different ways I could do this. Maybe I'll do extrude, right? These are curves, I can extrude them. I can extrude them as solids, that would work, right? So let's see here. If I do extrude, try typing that in. Let's see, there we are. Sorry, my wrist, sometimes my left hand keeps hitting the touchpad by accident. So sometimes Windows isn't selected and I'm like, I don't know, it's weird. Extrude curve, yeah, that'll work. Sometime today. Select the curves to extrude. Go ahead and select all of these dudes. All right, now it's going to say both sides, no, solid, yes, that looks good. Delete inputs. I'm going to say, yeah, let's delete the input. Why not? I'm going to delete the curves that I inputted in. And now extrusion distance by direction is just going to pick the Z direction by default, which is exactly what I want. So extrusion distance, I'm just say type 0.03 and hit enter. All right, now I have these as three-dimensional thick sort of chipboard-like ribs. Now, what's interesting and to note here, and so this isn't going to be exactly correct, but it'll be good enough for the drawing. You'll notice that, again, you no doubt you noticed it. If you didn't notice it in Rhino before, you noticed it when you started to put this together, right? All of these ribs have to bend, right, in this sort of the flat direction, right? And so you know that none of these are actually planar, right? And yet here we are, we laid them all out and unrolled them and unfolded them out to be flat over here. So I couldn't figure out a nice, easy way for all of you to be able to put notches in these to be able to explode them upwards, nor could I find an easy way for you to manipulate and bend these. So we're just going to do our best knowing that ahead of time, right? So one thing I'm going to say is, let's look at these. Let's turn on the, okay, so this is U0, and that's U1, U2, U3. Now all the way over here would be U15. All right, so we know that U0 is over here, and we know that this is U0, U1, U2, okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually place these close to where they would be here, and then I can move them up or down in Z from there, right? So I'm going to do a couple of things here. here are my U's. Just going to sort of look at my viewports all at once. I'm going to flip these upwards since they're right now they're laid out in the XY plane, and that's exactly where I don't need them to be, right? All right, so I'm going to go to my right-hand view. I'm just going to snap, and I'm going to, oh, that was move. I'm going to use rotate. There we go, rotate, snap, rotate them upwards. Yeah, there we go. All right, and now in this direction, I'm going to rotate them. I'm going to snap. Oh, come on. Really? I don't know what this is doing. Here we go. Snap here, snap there, and then put them down like this, right? So now they're ready to, almost ready to be moved in position here. Now I just need to rotate them in plan as well. All right. Yeah, look at that. Oh. Okay. And so that's U0, U1, U2. All right. So now these aren't going to line up perfectly when I move this over to this one, right? Because this one's actually bent, right? And so it has curvature in that other direction. However, it's good enough, again, to sort of make these assembly instructions so that you have something that's understandable. So now I'm just going to sort of serially move these out and over here, one by one. Just going to snap them to the sort of requisite over here. Let's see. Turn off the V's just so I have less things I can accidentally snap to. Yeah. All right. So there's that one. I'll come over here and do the same thing, right? And so I'm just going to sort of keep going back and forth and moving these in place. Snappy, snap, snap, snap. All right, snap there. And I'll just keep doing this back and forth, right? If I'm tired of moving things around, maybe I'll move these over a little closer to where I need them. There we are. Maybe avoid having to sort of manually pan and tumble around trying to find different items. Yeah, at this point, hopefully you can begin to drive the software instead of letting the software drive you, right? That's always important. Rhino and Revit and AutoCAD and Photoshop and Illustrator, they should all be working for us, not the other way around, right? And that's how I feel. Let's see, I'm going to move these upwards as well in the Z just to get them a little closer to where I want them to be here. Yeah, all right. Move. And again, you can see some of these are bending and flexing quite a bit in the actual model. Here, I'm just trying to, again, line these up so that when we move them around in Z, that they look like they could, theoretically align. Knowing that it's kind of hard to just sort of bend things in a digital environment, at least with precision. And in the physical environment, it's hard to bend them with precision as well, right? So you almost have to just sort of let the material sort of self-settle and find an equilibrium point as you put it together. All right, so again, I'm just sort of going through the motions here, trying to get all of these things in the same alignment. It takes a few minutes, honestly, right? So this is that trade-off, right? I mean, the interesting thing is that, that Rhino script did a lot of the hard lifting for me. That frees me up to do some of this TLC that I need to just make the perfect drawing, right? Give it a little bit of human touch here. The last thing you want to do is feel like you're at the mercy of whatever the software spits out at you and you have no control. And in fact, I'd argue that kind of thinking is what would drive things to be automated completely, right? So I don't think the software can be creative for you, right? Certainly not. It's a nice tool to augment your creativity. All right, so just moving this along, trying to wax philosophically at the same time, just as, so you don't bore you to death. I could talk like Bob Ross, if you guys even know who that is. Happy little rib. Let's give that rib a friend. Yeah, let's move it over here. Almost there, right? We're so close, actually. All right, just a little bit of patience. A little bit of time up here, up front, pays off in the back end. If you keep everything organized well, right, it really will. All right, so there's some ribs. You can see again the difference between the ribs that were, are curved and bent in one direction versus the ones that are laid out flat and are planar, right? So there is that discrepancy there. But again, for these drawings, I think it's perfectly fine. Anyway, all right, so I'm going to turn the V strips on now and turn the U strips off. Now I have another set of strips to sort of snap to. All right, look at that. So let's try it. Again, I need to sort of rotate these ribs around a bit. So I'll move them up here. Going in from the side view, let's say the right view this time. Oh, I moved them. Why do I keep doing that? Come on, Josh. Yikes. All right, there we are. Oh, we're really close. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate them in this view. Again, I'm going to snap over here and snap over here and sort of tilt them downwards a bit. There's our V1 or V0, V1 all the way to V15 all the way down. So that'll help us keep things a little straight there. All right. What else? Move these out a bit and move these around. All right, now let's find V0. Is that V0? Let's look. In fact, it is. That's V0 right there. So that's V1 all the way to V15. All right, so there we are. There's V0. And again, I'm just going to sort of move these into place. Just ever so carefully, just making sure I'm snapping to the right point so that these things look like they kind of match up here. Kind of goofy looking when you compare the sort of assembled version versus the planar version, but gotta start somewhere, right? All right. What did it just do? It just sort of turned on me big time. My apologies. There we go. Nobody likes to be, ooh, it's like vomit vision. Like hopefully you don't get motion sickness easily because, watching me do some of this stuff could easily make you nauseous. And there we go, it's a little better. Yeah, now I can sort of see a little better what we're doing there, zooming in and out, rotating around that center. All right. Again, I'm just going to quickly try to move these into place as best I can here. And there we are. I'm going to turn off mid and intersection. Just too many snaps to try to contend with here. And at some point, I'm probably just going to move these up and over just so they're sort of closer and I don't have to keep changing my vantage point so often. All right. Snap. 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 And I'll just keep going around doing that. You'll see this will be a start, right? I might need to further manipulate these, sort of make things look correct after I pull them apart in Z. I'm almost done. Oh, that's not so bad. Go ahead and move these again up a little higher. Again, just sort of keep them in my view here so I can, do this with a little more agility here. All right, there we are. Snap and snap. Snap and snap. Snap. I'll be glad when I don't have to say the word snap over and over again here soon. I think I just snapped that in the wrong place. Of course I did. There we are. Right. Okay, once again, I'm just going to move these around. Okay. Yikes. All right, maybe a little too much, but whatever. I'm never happy. There we are. All right, let's see. Snap there. We'll move this one into place. There, go to your little home there. All right, perfect. Again, just sort of moving these things around. It takes a little bit of time. Right? It's not so bad practice though with get the muscle memory down. How these things move around. One last one. All right. So again, trying to keep all these things together. There's the U strips and the V strips. Let's turn the U strips and the V strips off. Just going to take these and I'm going to move them away. I'm going to move them down in the Z direction here a bit. All right, now I'll turn my U and V strips back on. Right, so there's the sort of fully put together version. These are the strips that I'm showing. They're going to look like they're exploding downwards. Right. Go ahead and just select these. Right, in this case, there's a directionality of the notches, so that'll tell me which direction, which set of ribs go down versus up. Right, so I'll move these down further. I'm just going to, maybe I, oopsie, actually selected a couple of things wrong there. That would probably help if yeah, there we are. All right, one last, there we are. Okay, ta-da. So there's part of it, right? I can move these up or down now once I start to calibrate that to my actual Axon view. All right. Again, I can always refer back to this. This is V1 or V0, right? So this is going to be V0. And I can then start to put these in order and start to lay them out accordingly on my desktop based off of this drawing that I'm making, right? Okay, now let's get to the next part. And that is, I'm going to now open up the graph with my shading components. And let's take a look at first of all, the shading components, and we'll bake those in, right? And I'll show you how you can move them as well if you need to. But the other thing I'm going to do with those is I want to really take a close look at how they're ordered so that I can start to label these correctly. And so then when you have this drawing to help you understand where each of those labels like A0 or A1 and B20, B15, let's say, where they actually go, right? And I think that's really important. I noticed that you guys had some issues with that. And so we'll take a look, all right? Okay, so there's a logic to it. And it's one of those things where I'm gonna do it for you and record it so you can always refer back to it if you need to. And then if you still need help, I recommend doing this sooner rather than later, so that you can ask me, during class, and I can really literally just, sort of pull it up with you. You can share your screen and we can take a careful look. All right, so let's see. At this point, I'm going to open up Grasshopper, type in the command Grasshopper, and watch it slowly load. Grasshoppers, pythons, honeybees, ladybugs, kangaroos, wasp. Oh, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I like wasp actually. There's like a whole zoo here. We'll use rabbit here in a little bit as well as wasp in the next one. Yay. Anyway, there's even human. Guess it's another animal, I suppose. So Right. Let me find my unrolled shading components. Yeah, maybe I'll do that. I'll do the unrolled shading components. Why not? Although I don't really need the unrolled version. I just want the shading components themselves. All right. So if we look at this, right? You guys all have some sort of version of this file, no doubt. There are my components, right? On the surface. 15 and 15, right? All right. And then here's the sort of laid out versions, the flattened versions with some labels on them, right? Oh yeah. Okay. I do kind of want these flattened versions because we'll start selecting certain things and starting to understand which is which, right? So we'll start to match these things up as we go. All right. So again, I'm always looking at, here's the y-axis, here's the x-axis, and the sort of Cartesian coordinate grid. This is this sort of positive xy quadrant, positive x, positive y. And so I know that this is v0 and this is u0 over here, right? So I'm going to look at this corner. But first and foremost, let's go ahead and bake some of these dudes out. Well, actually, no, let's look at this right now. Let's understand which component is which, right? So we started labeling these things A1 in this direction. And I believe as they go, right? So this is A1, B1. I must have something off here because I have an F2 and a G2 over here when I should have an A2, G2. So let's see here. I have 15 cells. So that means I have 15 items. So if I go to my labels, where am I generating these labels? Right over here somewhere. Yeah, right here. This is where I'm creating a sequence of letters. Number of elements in the sequence. I only have 10. I need 15. So I'm going to set that to 15. La la la. Same thing over here. First number in series, the step size, the number of values, we'll go with 15. That sounds like a great idea. 15. All right, now let's take a look at this. We had to do this with a few of yours last time. A1, A2, A3, this one's stepping B1. So basically in rows, we have each column is a number and each row is a letter, right? So as I move up in rows, the letter changes. As I move over in columns, the number changes. All right. Okay, and so if you look at this, I plug in this list, right, of curves. And so these are in the order, right, that all of this sort of, it maintains the order of, let's say, these components, right, and then them joined together and then them unrolled, and then the outer edges and the inside edges, and then the points to place text on, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the first item here, right, and then the second item and the third item, and I'm going to see how it actually moves, right? So I can start to understand which direction is A1, A2, A3 over here on my model, all right? So first and foremost, if you look at this, these are the joined versions. They're going to turn green when I select them, and indeed there they are. And that's what I'm going to test, right? So here I have a data tree, right? 225 branches, one item each. I'm going to pull open the sets tab, right? Here's where I can, and part of this is I have the list items, right? The list tools. So these are things I can do when I have a list of stuff, right? So if I pull that open, I'm going to find one specific item from the list, right? And so I'm going to pull out, like, let's say the first item from the list. So I'm going to set that integer to 0 for the index. Now this is a data tree, not a list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say whatever data tree I plug in, I'm going to flatten it into a list. Okay, right here, I right click on that input and say flatten. Now I can plug this tree in. Okay, and it's going to say, it's going to flatten into a base list of 225 values. I'm going to find the first one and it's right here, right? And I'm going to click on that so it highlights green so I can visually see it and understand. Okay, that's that one, A1, and that's that one right there, right? Now, if I want to confirm this, I can do the exact same thing. I can basically copy and paste this component that I made. I can plug in one of these as well, right? So maybe I plug in this right here. I double check that. Now I need to look and see what turns green. And indeed, it's this item right here, right? So this is one of the four edges. Contains a collection of generic curves. Yeah. All right. So yeah, we flattened it all. All right, great. Okie dokie. Now, one other thing I'm going to do, right? I noticed that this is a tree with 4 values each. Before I flatten this, I'm going to do something else here, right? I'm going to join all of these together. So I'm going to take all 4 items in each of those tree branches and join them into a closed polyline. Surprised I didn't do that before. Let's see if I can do that here. Join curves, right? So I went to the curves tab, right? Because I'm doing something with curves and lines. Go to the utilities, there's join curves. Join as many curves as possible. Well, that sounds like a good plan to me. Can plug them in there. Preserve direction of input curves. I'm just going to leave that the way it is. So now I have 200, go from 225 items, 4 items each to, let's see, I should just have 225 items, 1 item each. I'll plug that in. All right, now I see, now I'm going to get this whole outline and say, okay, that's the first one. All right, so now let's see the second one. So I'm going to change the index to 1 to get the second item in the list. Okay, so I can see that here's A1, this is B1. All right, there's B1 right there. All right, now I'm going to come over here. And again, this was A1. I'm going to change the index of this one to 1 to get the second version. Okay, so that's going to be B1 right there, right? So I can begin to compare the second item in this list, right, with the second item in this list. I'll hold down the shift key so I can select both of them at the same time. You can see that both of them will be highlighted green, right? So this item right here goes here, right? So now I know that, and that's essentially solves the puzzle, right? I have A1 and B1, right? So now I know that this is A1, B1, C1, D1, and this is A1, right? A2, A3, A4, A5, A6, A7, A8, A9, A10, all the way to A15. All right. Now, I don't expect you to like necessarily dream that up offhand, but I do want you to sort of, again, be able to refer back to this. Try it on your own. And then if you run into problems, I can look at it with you, okay? All right. But needless to say, right, that's kind of how we can solve this puzzle. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and take these joined components. I'm just going to bake them in. I'll make a new layer, or no, I'll just use a different layer. Let's see. What does this say? Baked shading components. Yeah. All right. So I'll make that the active layer. I'll bake these in, right? Baked shading components. Sure. There we are. And go ahead and turn this off. Yeah. All right. Now I've baked these in, right? So now I have a complete version of these, right? Almost anyway. And I need to, again, I need to maybe explode these shading components, let's say upwards, right? At least in my case, that's what I did, right? Try to minimize the amount of overlap between certain layers here. And so if I can utilize both the space above my complete shell and the space below as well, then that's one way of thinking about it. There's more than one way to do this, right? So, you know, we can talk about different ways here in a bit. All right, so if I was to just sort of like take these again and select these objects and just move them up, let's say make a copy of them and move them in the Z direction, right? What becomes hard is to label some of the things that are all the way back here and kind of occluded, right? They're sort of hidden back behind things. There's a lot of overlap here when I'm this oblique view, right? And so if you think about it just for a moment, what I did is I actually took these and I moved them all up onto the same plane so I could see the grid of them, right? And could label them so I can understand which direction's which, right? And in this case, I guessed right. I didn't actually do this, but so, well, I was close actually. You know, A1 I think is over here, right? And then it goes to all the way to 0, or sorry, O1. And then over here it's A15 and O15, right? So this is out of order, but anyway. Okay, so the way I did that, let's talk about it here. I'm just going to open up Grasshopper again. I'm going to make a new file. I'll just say File and New. Okay. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, let's see. I'm going to, first of all, go to the Params tab at the very beginning, right? The Params. Go to the geometry. What I want to do is I want to make a little widget over here, right? For, let's say, surfaces or B-reps, right? Polysurfaces in this case. And I want to reference in all of these baked versions, these Lavender components into Grasshopper so I can start to make copies of them within Grasshopper, right? So I'm going to find B-rep, right? Again, that brep or B-rep, that's just a fancy way of saying polysurface. So go ahead and put that in. Right click and say set multiple B-reps. And that way I can go to the layer for the baked shading components and say select all the objects in that layer and hit enter. Right. In other words, I'm just selecting these objects. Now they're referenced in here, 225 of them. Yay. All right. Now, let's think about this for a moment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a plane that I want to sort of make all of these things sort of sit on. So I'm just going to make a planar surface. I'm going to go in the top view in Rhino. Just going to make a planar surface here. Here we are. And now you can see here in my side view, there's the surface I made, right? It's actually at the XY plane, not a big surprise, because I drew it in top view, but where Z equals 0, I want to sort of move it upwards now. Maybe close to where I'd want these components to sort of rest and sit, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these up to this plane. And there's several different ways I can do this, right? Now this is a surface, a planar surface, so I need to reference this in as well. So I'll go back again to the Params tab, Geometry, make a Surface tab, right-click, Set One Surface, select this planar surface that I made in Rhino, right? So now I have both of those referenced in. Yay. All right. So one thing I could do, let's see here, is, let's just take a look, right? I'm going to go to the Transform tab because that can let me rotate, move, scale, things like that, right? So I'm going to look at the Move command, Move. All right. So if I look at the ingredients to perform a move operation, right? Not a huge surprise here, but the first ingredient is the geometry to move, right? So the base geometry, it's going to make a copy of this geometry wherever I want to move it to. Okay, how far to move, right? In this case, it's not a direction and a distance, it's a vector. So it's both of those combined, right? The direction and distance. So what I can do is I can actually give it a line, right? And that line will actually be the vector, both in terms of the direction and then the length of it will be the distance or the magnitude, right? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a point along each of these components and then draw a line vertically from that point up, then find exactly where that line intersects here, the plane, then use that line segment, right, as a vector to move each of these up so that they coincide in the plane, right? So let me just draw this for a moment, just so you sort of understand here. I'm going to find a point, let's say for, let me zoom in a little better here. Oh, come on. There we are. All right, perfect. Now, where is it? Annotate. So I'm going to find a point somewhere along one of these items, right? I'm going to draw a line through it in Z of a certain length. Make sure that all of them sort of pass through this plane. And then I'm going to find exactly that location where the line intersects the plane as a point, right? And I can then understand, I'll highlight this in red. I'll use this line right here then, right? This segment. This is a start point, this is an end point, as a vector in order to move this from here up to here. Now, once I plug a bunch of these in, I get a bunch of these lines and a bunch of intersection points, right? And so all of these will move onto that plane. All right, so let's try it. Hopefully that makes some sense here. Let's build this up. I'm gonna, just to find a point along, somewhere along this BREP, I'm gonna use a tool that we've used before. It's called explode the BREP or deconstruct BREP. I'm gonna explode it into faces, edges, and vertices. I'm just gonna pull one of these vertices off, right? One of these vertexes. So let's see here. I'm going to use the, again, pull off, like, let's say just the first set, maybe. So, right, there we are. Okay, now I'm going to use these points, right? It's these green ones. This is interesting. 900. Oh, that's the 900 vertices. Okay, let me, sorry, I'm just double checking here. 225, okay, yeah. All right, turn this off so we can just see one instance here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a line, right, by start point, direction, and length. Okay, so this will be my start point. My direction will be Z. So I'll go to vector. I'll just give it the world Z axis. And then for a length, I'm just gonna make something ridiculously large. 20, something like that. All right, now, I don't know, looks like all of these sort of intersected that plane. All right, so that's the first step. All right, now we need to sort of trim these points. So I'm going to go to, let's say, intersect tab. And I'm going to say curve and self, surface and curve. Oh, that sounds good. All right, so I'm going to say, find all the places where this surface intersects all of these lines. There we are. And I get all of these points. Intersection overlap curves. There's the points right there. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm just going to make one more set of lines here. I'll go ahead and turn the preview of these lines off. Okay. And I'm going to say start point and end point. So this will be my start point right here. And then these will be my end points right there. Right now I have a set of translation vectors. So now I can move all of these with all of these. Let's see what happens. Oh, I just made a mistake. Oopsie. All right, give it just one sec. So the mistake I made is this is a list and this is a data tree I'm plugging in. So it's going to try to do this like, I don't know, 200, what's the square of 225? It's going to be ridiculous. That's not good. So I'm going to say graphed into a tree. All right, that looks much better. Let's let this sit for a second. Yeah. Turn this plane off for a moment. Oh yeah, that's gorgeous. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and take these moved versions and I'm going to bake them in to a file I called exploded shading components, right? So I have just the ones baked in that are sort of conform to the surface, right? Now I have the sort of exploded version. Okay, hit okay. You can turn that off for a moment. Yeah, they are. Right? Again, I put this up here. What I'm going to do is I'll save this file and I'll upload it to Canvas, just in case you want to refer back to it, right? I would encourage you to try this on your own, following along, but you can always refer back to that one. And if you're really stuck, just use it, okay? But I would go through the steps, try to understand how it works, right? I think that's the important key here. Not too difficult to think about, but all we did was we sort of projected everything up to a surface, right? So we just looked at the ingredients that we needed, and then we generated the ingredients. We had to go about it a little bit of an indirect way, but nevertheless, it worked. Right? Okay. So at this point, this is already set to parallel, but I can go to set view, isometric, and then I can pick northeast versus northwest. So let's pick northeast. Here we are. Okay. Now this is my my 30-30 isometric. If I accidentally mess it up, I need to go back here, set view, isometric, set it again before I do the make 2D and the rendering and all that stuff, right? But while I have this here and the other viewports, I'm going to move these things up or down now that I understand where this exact oblique point of view is. Just try to get rid of any visual overlaps here where I don't want them. So I'm moving these components up a little bit in the Z direction just to sort of give a little bit of air, right? Just a little bit of space here. I'm going to move these upwards. I have a large gap here I can start to close up. Now the question is, how much overlap can you live with or not live with, right? You know, I can either embrace the overlap or pull it down and just, there we go, right? Try to get all that just right. So now if I expand this view, if I accidentally move it, right, I need, like I just did with my right mouse button, go back to the viewport, set view, isometric, northeast, right? Okay, there we are. So now we have the components ready for a nice make 2D, a nice exploded axon drawing. And again, remember, you know, as you, again, A1, so we were moving in this direction. I can't remember which one it was, but we went through it, right? So again, if we, once you get into Illustrator, right? And in this case, I just composited, you know, basically all the make 2D stuff with a rendering, a quick rendering, right? That I just sort of captured. I had viewport rectangle on so I could line them up really nicely. I had the scene silhouettes on, but then the scene silhouettes were a real mess throughout this. So what I did is I just sort of set everything to a uniform line weight. Then I decided maybe it'd be nice to go around, and I manually was starting to go around just the sort of complete version here in the middle, where it's all sandwiched together, and started to draw like my own scene silhouette really quickly. You know, so I made my own sort of manual scene silhouette layer so that I could, you know, again, the idea here being that everything else was drawn for you automatically. And so now you can go back through and just, you know, spend half an hour going around and just sort of, you know, again, finally crafting this stuff. So it's just perfect, right? You know, I don't know if you're using this stuff in Studio yet or not, but when you do, I mean, I teach 4th year Studio, and I expect like drawings with lots of information in them. I love a good floor plan, but you know, like a certain size drawing has to have a certain amount of information in it, right? So, you know, in this case, you know, this is an opportunity to go in and spend that time that you would have. You don't have to generate all this stuff from scratch. And so you can spend all that extra time you have cleaning up and auditing and editing this stuff, just making it perfect, making it gorgeous, right? Adding nuance to it, right? And just sort of zooming in pretty closely here, you know, in this case. So all of these air gaps here, I'm not going to mess with. I just wanted a sort of nice scene silhouette around the overall sort of constructed thing, just to try to make it pop a little bit, right? Again, it's all just about legibility, making a good drawing. You know, again, adding that visual emphasis, that hierarchy that you hopefully have learned about over the last couple of years and practiced, to direct the viewer's eye, right? To give emphasis where you want it. This is literally what we do as architects. We make drawings. Even construction documents. I spent a lot of time actually once having to do all of these limestone details. And it was all about figuring out the exact line weights so that somebody maybe wearing boots in ankle deep mud and pouring down rain on a construction site could figure out exactly where the damp proofing went on the backs of these sort of dimension stone pieces, where the flashing goes, and all these other things that simply look like lines almost in the detail drawings. So, you know, it actually translates to not just pretty drawings, right, but actual contract construction drawings and documents. Right? So everything you do is something to be crafted. So again, we talked about this being actually A1 over here. Oops, I turned the labels off instead of just unlocking them, right? So I would go ahead and change this to, oh, come on. What is going on here? All right. You think I'd be better at Illustrator by now, right? You would think. We talked about that being O, and then this being A15, and this being O15. Yeah. Right. You know, I added circles. You know, maybe these texts and these labels are kind of goofy looking, but, you know, I'm going to just sort of move these over and try to center them up. You know, you can always use some of these tools, these align tools, right, to start to line things, center them up together, things like that. So if you move this over a bit again, these leaders, I don't know. I mean, when you draw a line, I mean, here's all I did. I drew a line where I wanted to start, where I wanted it to end. You know, I made sure that it was the right line weight. And then here in the stroke, I can add arrowheads, in this case at the start point or at the end point. Just going to find this. I was using these, right? Okay. You don't want the leaders to, if your leader looks like that, it kind of looks weird. You want the leader to sort of look like it would, if it projected through the circle, it would actually meet up at the center point. So, you know, you can eyeball that usually, right? Try to get those all consistent. Down here, you know, again, you don't have to use circles for these tags or anything. But where you do have, oh, yikes, here we go. Trying to zoom in with my keyboard. You know, keeping things lined up, right, vertically or horizontally in some cases, you know, makes a big difference. Right? So again, once you start to look at these, you know, trying to sort of make sure they all make sense. What I'd like for you to do is to think about this as a set of 11 by 17 drawings. Maybe it takes 2 11 by 17s. Maybe some of you take 3 11 by 17s. I don't really care. The second one that I started to make over here would then be the sort of catalog of components all laid out for laser cutting, right? So all of these ribs, right, over here, let's see. Let me just open up the old file I had. There we go, laser cutting demo. Save changes? Sure, why not? So just to demonstrate here, if I turn on all of these layers, let's see what I have here. Right? I'm basically talking about this stuff, right? So here's where I would bring these out in top view, where I can see them all flattened out and say export selected. Put them on my desktop here, call these flattened components or something, O1. Make sure I'm exporting them out as an Illustrator file. I'll go ahead and do this in front of you real quick. Snapshot of current view, sure, that's fine. File open, here in Illustrator, I'll open up that new file. Flattened components, there we are. And I'm just going to sort of copy, Control C, and paste, Control V. Now, these are not the correct scale at all, right? I think we can all agree there. And so that's one thing I would need to do is sort of scale these up so that they look comparable in scale to get this, so that when somebody's looking at this, they go, oh, okay, I see what we're doing here. You know, again, I could begin to lay these out and even change their direction if I need to, in order to sort of understand them a little better. I haven't really laid this out at all, but I'm just sort of I'm just sort of spitballing here for a moment. When in doubt, give yourself a little more room and zoom out too if you need to. Use that whole artboard space if you want to. I like them. Yeah, there we go. Kind of big, you know. All right, so there we go. Getting them larger. Maybe they need to be even larger than that. Yeah, I think so. I think so. All right, so holding down that shift key on my keyboard so that they scale proportionally, right? Can't accidentally stretch them more in one direction than the other. Just sort of move these in a little bit, start to make them fit a little better. Right, and maybe there's some sort of interesting pattern I can actually arrange these in. For whatever reason, my spacebar key on my keyboard isn't working to pan. That's really annoying. Might just need to restart my machine. It's been a couple of months since I've done that. They don't make Macintoshes like they used to. At least they didn't make this model. All right. Let's see. Just move some of these in place, right? So again, I'm making a catalog. I probably wouldn't leave these red and blue, right? But then I would again label these similarly to how I'm doing over there. And again, just sort of make a nice assembly drawing, right? I mean, if you think about this for a moment, you know, I mentioned some of those examples the other day, right? So, you know, usually they sort of lay out these pieces as well, so you can start to understand what we're dealing with, and you can even lay them out, you know, let's say on your tabletop, your desktop at home, or your floor, or whatever you're doing to wherever you're assembling this stuff. All right. So I'll just finish this version here for a moment. A few more minutes to do that. So this isn't the only thing we're going to do drawing wise, but this is one that's low hanging fruit. You can start to do sooner rather than later, and will actually help you with the assembly, fabrication and assembly of your final physical prototype, your final physical model, right? So this is one you can start to do right away when you start to budget your time out and spend an hour or two on this, okay? What's interesting is how these things match up. You know, they start to contract smaller, and then they expand outwards, swell out again. So let me just kind of have maybe a method to my madness here. I have an idea, and we'll test this out and see how well it works. I'm just going to scoot these things closer together. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to select them all at once. I'm going to rotate them like that. And move them up a bit. Yeah. All right, and I'll probably do the same thing with these down here, right? Start to, again, make this a companion sort of piece catalog, how the pieces go together, right? Sort of companion documents. And again, you know, I understand you have these labels here, but you'd probably want to use the same sort of labels here, right? And start to talk about, okay, this is U0, here are all the U's, here's U15, right? There's then down here are the V's, here's V0, here's V15, or whatever it is, right? Same thing over here, it's A1, this is A2, A3, all the way to A15. This is O1, O15 up here, right? So you can begin to, again, think a couple steps ahead now and make this work for you instead of the other way around, right? If you do this right, this drawing could be a really nice sort of way for you to add that quality control, right? When you're assembling this thing, okay? Making sure that every piece goes in the right place. Go ahead and save that for now. All right. Now, I don't necessarily have an assignment and a deadline for this, except to say that the same deadline for your final prototype will be the deadline for all of project 2, right? So this drawing will be due, these set of drawings, like 11x17, will be due at the same time in mid-November. So you have a couple of weeks, but with that comes the responsibility to budget your time accordingly, right? We'll also next week start to go over some performance things, and that'll generate another set of drawings, another set of diagrams with some color mapping, talking about the performance of this thing, how well it performs as a shading device, right? So, keep that in mind and budget your time accordingly, right? If you, again, think about this, for every credit hour of in-person, right, you're supposed to have 2 hours of outside work, right? Something like that. I forget the federal definition of a credit hour, right? So if you budget your time accordingly, this is set up to conform to that pretty nicely, right? Some weeks you might need a little more of that time, and other weeks you might need a little less of that time. But do budget your time accordingly. Go ahead and stop sharing. Any quick questions?